without further ado, I'm going to talk about our good friend Ted Williams. He is the principal consultant and trainer of Des Moines, Iowa-based human resources consulting and training firm, the Williams Group, TWG. And Ted, actually, he is very, very used to talking on any kind of platform, right, Ted?
Correct.
And he is a keynote and session speaker for annual professional and trade association conferences and conventions all over the country. And he also performs on-site investigations in the areas of harassment and discrimination. And in addition, Ted serves as an expert witness to both the defendant and plaintiff's bar in both superior and federal court. Good to know, right? He also has a heavy legal background in employment and labor law. Lastly, Ted has performed as a facilitator for board of directors and executive team strategic retreats for client companies and organizations in both the public and private sectors. So that is our speaker today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what you will learn today, right? That is the question. So this workshop webinar, unlike most, is geared toward providing you with insight from a workforce expert's point of view. From this vantage point, you, the new or veteran supervisor manager, will learn how they know, which will help you manage, lead, and succeed at communication in the workplace. And the last thing you will learn today is this workshop webinar will also provide you with new communication skills. Number one, techniques, approaches, and strategies that will separate you from others and give you a sound foundation for workplace success. So right now, Ted, I want you to kind of talk about some things as to where we're at in this current environment.
Okay, I want you to give me the next slide, and it'll help me as I walk you through that. Fact of the matter is, we are in what I call a new reality. This is the first time ever, in my knowledge, that all over the world, we are all starting to work remotely at once, or put it another way, at the same time. As many of you may know, I've been using, I'll give you an example. I've been using Zoom for a long time. But for many of you, it was basically a shock to have to start to use GoToMeeting, to use Zoom and all the technology that goes with it in order to continue doing your business both internally and externally. No doubt, this can be stressful, but it's necessary if you're going to continue your business. I would submit to you that I work in 21 different industries throughout the United States and Canada, and I can tell you right now, all of us are in the same boat. We're all doing Zoom. We're all doing GoToMeeting. We're having some days we just Zoom out, you know.
Yeah,
but it has shown our adaptability. We can do it. We can do it, and look how. Think about it. We're in our 13th week of, some people call it lockdown. I don't know if I want to call it that. But I would say, look at where you are right now this week and where you were the first week. And you'll kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about. Next slide, Dan. I need the next slide.
All right, it's coming.
Okay. You now have a better sense of what you can and can't do outside your company's traditional processes. If I had told you 14 weeks ago that you would be communicating, directing, assigning, and holding accountable people from home, you would have suggested I had a place in an insane asylum. But COVID-19 is forcing us in pace and in scale to be innovative. We are having folks do things we never thought could be done, and in the main, we're pretty much satisfied with it. Many are finding simpler, less expensive, and faster ways to operate. And all of this points to this one thing that, it's been my opinion, is the innate ability to change. It's been my experience that the only individual who wholeheartedly embraces change is a 3-week-old baby. The rest of us talk change, but what it really means is you guys go change and leave me alone. But we are being forced collectively and respectively to make changes. Now, this crisis, this opportunity for change, obviously has threats, but it also creates opportunities. I believe that this is a real opportunity for us as employers to move away from some prescribed approaches and standardized solutions. Look at some of the things we're doing now that we never thought we would do. I'm not pleased that we have COVID-19, but it has forced us to reinvent the future of work. And I'm submitting to you that I see a whole body of work when we bring people back on site after we have overcome this pandemic. Next slide, Dan.
So folks, now we're gonna actually go into a format where many of you may be already familiar. If you followed my webinar with Ying, we do in a Q&A kind of format. I actually had a good conversation with Ted previous to our webinar today to try to tackle some of the most frequently asked questions, right, Ted?
Correct.
And we're gonna try to break those down, and hopefully these are some of the questions that you had as you logged in to our today's webinar. So my first question to Ted, so you can further expound upon, is all the articles I read say I should be in constant communication with my homebound staff. What do you say to that?
Give me my response. Bullet number one. Most organizations are now in their 13th week of having their employees work from home. We can agree to that. In the beginning, for many of us, it was important, it was even critical to communicate with group and individual staff members regarding their work. We needed to be on top of it. We needed to make sure that assignments, projects, initiatives were on task, on time, and acceptable. But now we've been in it 13 weeks in, and I can tell you, to almost every employer that I deal with, I am now saying, do not over communicate. Do not have unnecessary meetings, because when you first started, you said, we're gonna meet every Tuesday at 9 o'clock and see where we are. And then we're gonna follow up every Thursday to discuss what we discussed every Tuesday. Then we're gonna meet every Friday to discuss what we did for Tuesday and Thursday. We don't need all those meetings, guys. Next bullet, please. Because at this juncture, if we have properly led and managed our folk, that we should know they should know what's expected of them, projects, assignments, and initiatives. Now, I'm gonna bounce the burden to you guys. The only way they can know that projects, assignments, and initiatives is if you know them. You are going to have to be precise. You're going to have to be succinct. You're going to have to be clear in what you want from these employees in terms of expectations and outcomes. Don't get cute and be nuanced. I don't want to say this to Jenny because it might hurt her feelings. I don't want to criticize Bill because he's at home and he's got a wife, he's got twin kids, and a big dog. Fact of the matter is, that employee needs clarity. They need to know what it is that you expect of them. They need to have time certain. I want this done by X, Y, Z. Here are the components I'm looking for. You will find that so many employees are begging for leadership, are begging for direction. And the only way we can do that is that we have to, as managers, owners, and employers communicate clearly. And for many of us at the workplace, we were able to get away with it because an employee could run to another employee and say, what did he say? What did he mean? But if they're homebound, that may not necessarily be the case. They might not be able to go ask a colleague, what did you mean? So you need to be very, very clear about what you want and your expectations.
You know, Ted, in meetings so frequently, sometimes the employees also may feel that maybe they're not trusted.
You know what? Now you just stole, Dan. You stole my tagline. You snatched it from me, and I'm not going to be very forgiving. That is the overarching theme of this whole pandemic situation. Do we trust our staff, and do they trust us? And I'm going to be talking about that later on. How do we identify and establish and maintain that trust? You brought it up. It will be answered because it is, to me, the most singular aspect of this whole process.
So here's my second question. I am somewhat concerned that with all the distractions at home, family, pets, vendors, everything you can think of, will have difficulty remaining. My staff members, rather, will have them very unfocused and confused at times during the workday. So after all, the company is paying for all of the hours they put in every day, and you know, we want to make sure that they're productive.
Okay.
How do we make sure that we feel that they are taking work seriously?
Next slide, please. You know, 13 weeks isn't enough time to gather all the empirical data to support this premise. But if you talk to most employers, they will tell you that they are receiving good or better performance from their distance workforces than when they were working on site. And there's a reason for that. Almost to a person, people who are working at home are deathly afraid that the employer may think they are not working. One of the biggest issues we're having with a lot of our clients is asking and demanding that their employees cut back. Many employees are working 12 to 14 hours a day at home because they want to be assured that the employer knows that they're working, because one of their biggest fears is they may lay me off. They may not appreciate what I'm doing, so I am going to make sure that I deliver. So from my perspective, and as I mentioned, I work in 21 different industries. And so I get a chance to see what's happening. And by the way, I work nationally, so I get a chance to see from region to region what's going on. And lo and behold, the elephant in the room is trust. Here's a question I have to ask you. Can you, as a manager, trust your staff to perform the work they are paid to do? All right? Next, if you can't trust your homebound workforce to perform the work, why not? Why is it you can't trust them? What is it that you have done or they have done that would cause mistrust? Because it would be my belief, if you can't have trust in your workforce, my question is, why do you have these people on board? Why are they, if you hired them and you can't trust them, why have you kept them? Haven't you identified what needs to be fixed? Have you not initiated a rehabilitation program in terms of, here's how we do it here at Community CPA, here's how we do it here at the Williams Group? And if they are not able to adhere to that, perhaps it's best for both parties to part ways. Trust me when I tell you, it is not illegal to dismiss an employee or even not hire that employee if there's not a good fit. As long as it's not racial discrimination, gender discrimination, age discrimination, or disability discrimination, it is a valid reason to dismiss or not hire an employee. So my challenge to you is, if you have trust issues, this is an opportunity for mid-course correction. Now, if you are willing to address mid-course corrections, are you prepared to manage consequences if acceptable performance has not been met? Many of you did not or were uncomfortable having that conversation with employees in terms of unsatisfactory performance or disciplinary issues, because you were afraid that if you did, you would be accused of being a racist, a sexist, or God knows what kind of is there is out there. And I can tell you that if non-performance is an overarching theme, that's not racism, that's not sexism, that's not ageism, that's an employer insisting on getting what it is paid for. So when I ask you, are you prepared to manage the consequences, don't tell me you can't fire Bill because you're afraid you're going to get a lawsuit. I have a significant number of clients in California, and I'll share with you what some of the California employers are doing. Mm-hmm. They are countersuing employees who make frivolous lawsuits and demanding payment for them and their lawyers for having to deal with the lawsuits. Now, we're not doing that here in Iowa and in the Midwest, but what I'm suggesting to you is that you have an obligation, if you have done what you could to save an employee and he or she couldn't cut the mustard, it is a disservice to your hardworking other employees to keep that person on board. Look at the message you're sending if you do.
That's true. It doesn't take a lot of people to affect the entire operation. It just takes a few.
Only one, Dan. Only one sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you need to be mindful of that. Looking the other way and operating if this isn't real is a disservice to your organization, and it's a disservice to your customers, it's a disservice to your employees.
And my next question is, seems that a good way to ensure constant and consistent workforce performance is to establish clear, easily understandable telework policies and procedures.
Next slide, please. I would agree. And that's particularly true with your hourly folk, not to overlook your management and professional folk. People think about it. They're at home. They're an hourly employee, and under federal and Iowa law, if you work over 40 hours a week and you're an hourly employee, you're entitled to time and a half. Now, how do you as an employer know that that person indeed has worked past 40 hours? Again, did they seek permission or did you direct it? If you directed it, you know they worked past the 40 hours. And they will complete a timesheet or a clock or however way you do it, because many of you do it digitally. But what happens, say, how about this? Employee works, they're on a project, and it's not completed, it is due by X. They have hit their 40 hours, but they need to get it done. So they work an additional 8 hours. They did not get permission from you to do it, but they decided that if I'm going to get this done, I need to work that additional 8 hours, and they reported as such. What do? Well, if you have an established policies and procedures, it goes like this. I did not give you permission to work the 8 hours over 40. However, since you have worked those 8 hours over 40, this time I will pay that time and a half for those additional 8 hours. However, if you do it in the future and you do not get permission from me, that is insubordination. and it could lead to discipline up to and including termination. So you pay for the unauthorized 8 hours that first time. But if it occurs again, that is a performance issue, it's a disciplinary issue, and it needs to be addressed. You do not look the other way. You do not say, I'm not gonna pay you. You pay. But again, you go the disciplinary procedure up to and including termination if you need to. Many folks are implementing a time and attendance tracking system that can be assessed remotely, and you can, and I don't know, well, I do know that this can be done for your homebound employees. To the internet, they can do it. I don't know how many of you are doing it now, because even when it was on site, they were doing it with their computers. The FLSA, and let me be clear what that is. That's the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that is federal law, requires you to maintain records for each non-exempt employee, because they want to make sure that the employee is being properly paid and the employer is adhering to federal law. If you already use this software that you were using on site, it is very easily adaptable to using it with your distance employees. I was there, trust me, there are so many companies around offering this service. You can shop and find the one that works best for you. And I assure you, it's so highly competitive. The prices are competitive for these software programs.
Okay, so here's the next question. So how do I know whether my non-exempt and exempt employees are really working?
Oh, I love that one. That's a great question, and I need that next slide to support what I'm about to say.
Okay.
That slide doesn't want to come up, does it, Dane? Okay.
So slow.
Doesn't that drive you nuts? But here's the truth, guys. Think about this. Even when we were working on site, who was looking over employees' shoulders on a daily basis to see if work was done? We didn't know what, even when it was on site, just how much work was actually getting done. The Society for Human Resource Management, which I have been a member for at least 35 years, SHRM, suggests that what you do is you evaluate the job duties and responsibilities and how the performance of the job is measured while physically present. Physically present means you and the employee, and then determining whether physical presence is necessary for measuring, evaluating a job performance. You don't need to be standing over someone. You need to know whether or not you're getting a product, an outcome in a timely manner. And there is a norm. I was talking to someone today that told me they just hired a house cleaning person, and the house cleaning person took 4.5 hours to clean the master bathroom. Now, if any of you have a house cleaning service, I happen to have a 3-story, 2,800 square foot house, and I can tell you right now, it can be cleaned in 4 hours in its entirety, and it is spotless. So the question would become, what did this maid clean this bathroom with, a toothbrush? I mean, and the person was asking the question, should I keep this house cleaning service? And I had to suggest perhaps they might want to shop around. Okay. So one thing I strongly advise all of my clients: have strong. I need you to go back. You switch over. Go back. Have strong policies and procedures that clearly communicate to your employees, those at home, that working off the clock and underreporting or overreporting hours is prohibited and there will be consequences. Again, those consequences, here's the language. It could cause discipline up to and including termination. Now, is that a threat? No, that is not a threat. That is notification. And believe it or not, that is a legal requirement. You have to notify people if there's a transgression, what could occur. I've had situations in which I have been in court and the judge said, here's how it goes. Your Honor, we fired Joe because he's a horrible employee and he's been a horrible employee for the last 5 years and we finally got rid of him. And the judge says, did you ever notify Joe that he was a bad employee? No, Your Honor. Anybody should have figured that out. Case dismissed. You did not notify that employee that he or she was not doing the work that was required. So he had no chance to rehabilitate. Well, Judge, everybody knew it. You could see it. I ask you again, did you notify the employee? Did you do it verbally? Did you do it in writing? And by the way, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
I see.
So my point being is you have to be prepared to look an employee in the eye and be clear about your expectations and the ramifications that would accrue if you do not get those satisfactory expectations as outcomes. Next slide, please.
Now, I have to admit that working from home is really stressful for me and other people. And I know that it is stressful and stressing some, if not all, of my staff members. So how do I respond and manage in this type of environment in reality?
Next slide, please.
All right.
One way you can look at it is, for many of you, you believe that there are a lot of things that employees don't need to know. I'm one that says open the book. Be more transparent and discuss worst case scenarios. It can be scary being at home with the dog and the kids and not having that same camaraderie. And let's be frank, the grapevine is a powerful, powerful tool in the workplace. I'm not suggesting it's always the best tool, but I don't know any employee that's ever gotten rid of the grapevine. So use the grapevine. Instead of allowing employees to come up with their own devices as to what's happening and what's not happening, make it a point to share with them what's going on. And sometimes the response is, I don't know at this time. Don't be embarrassed to say, I don't know, particularly when it's true. Well, why don't you know? Right now, I work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And I can tell you right now, I have clients with 15,000 employees and I have clients with 5 employees. And in all honesty, even with the strategic long-range planning, most of us don't know what's going to happen between Monday and Friday. We don't know when we're going to be allowed to bring people back. We don't know whether the federal government is going to allow more PPP money. We don't know a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is, when you share that with employees, it may not answer their questions, but it allows them to know you care, you understand where their head's at, and you are going to keep them up to date as much as you can. So you get in front of increased gossip. You understand that there could be dysfunctional outcomes if you don't get in front of it. You understand that people get worn down. You would think, well, if you're working at home, how's that stressful? Most of us did not start work with the idea that we would be working at home. And I can assure you, I have a friend who has an 80-pound old English sheepdog. That sheepdog doesn't care jack about rules and regulations. They don't care about Zoom phone calls. You know what I mean? They don't care that this is a really difficult conversation that's going on. That dog wants that dog bone. That dog wants that extra dog food. It's time for my walk. I don't care about your priorities. That's stressful. And I tell people, everybody else has the same problem. All of our dogs are not paying attention to the rules. People are dropping in from the neighborhood. You didn't know they were going to knock on your front door. The Federal Express guy that was supposed to be here 2 hours ago just showed up. And he's saying he's not dropping it off until you come sign for it. This is real. And I think when people appreciate that you as employers and managers literally feel their pain, it doesn't go away, but it makes them feel at least they are connected and that you care. Again, information sharing is often seen as an indicator of trust. You trust them to trust you, and they trust you to trust them. Managers who are more open are more likely to be seen as credible and trustworthy. The one that thinks that he or she can hoard that information and then parse it out from time to time, that dog won't hunt. I would not suggest that route.
You know, Ted, there's a lot of times that our employees feel that we're not all on the same team. Sometimes it feels like it's me against you and you against me. And in order to maybe break that, you just have to be a little bit more vulnerable. Just have to be a little bit more open, maybe. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't see it as a sign of weakness. I see it as a sign of strength. Good leaders don't worry about optics. They worry about the common good. And that's what I'm suggesting. And I tell people all the time, there are two kinds of folk out here. They're the transactional people, and we need them. And they're the transformational people, and we really need them right now. And even if you happen to be more comfortable as a transactional person, and that's honest, that's nothing to be ashamed of. If you can, your people are counting on you to be transformational. Tell us where we need to go. Even if you can't be specific as we'd like, at least you're including us in your vision. Please try again in a moment. Okay?
Ted, isn't it true that right now, sometimes in a workforce, what the employers view as a transactional people are now stepping up to be transformational people?
You know what? When I do consulting work, I make a bet with top management. If you will give me a half a day, I will tell you who your true leaders are, regardless of their job title. But don't ask me how I got the information. I win every time. Because something about leaders, it doesn't matter what the title is. Employees know who's the leader. And they gravitate toward that leader. Because you know why? They know that leader gets it done, regardless of title. And I encourage, and interesting enough, I have had situations where I have had to referee the company leadership. Don't try to beat down that leader, work with that leader. This is a very valuable resource. Use it and use it well. If you have an organizational place in a title, so be it. If you don't, recognize that person's contribution, and when the time comes, maybe we can find a spot. Do not alienate that person. Do not make that person an internal or external enemy.
That's true. Yeah, then before we go into our 6 and 7, I know our audience don't know, we have only up to 7 questions. So before we get there, I want to let our audience know, feel free to drop a question in our Q&A, folks. We want to answer those because I know you guys had them as you came on board. And before we ask this question again, I have a side comment or a question for Ted about the transactional people versus transformational people.
Yes.
How important is it for an employer or a firm or a business, for that matter, to create an environment for transactional people to step up?
Well, think about it this way. We don't get things done without transactional people. So I'm not suggesting that that's not an honorable place to be. But not all of us are transformational. What did the kids say now? We need to know what lane we're in, all right? Some of us are one lane folk and are dadgum good at that one lane. Some of us are two lane folk. Just don't be greedy. But my point being is, if you have a person who is transactional, but who shows the possibility of being transformational, sit that person down, find out. And there's a term when I used to live in New Jersey, and I loved it. If something went awry, someone would look at you and say, you better find somebody and ask them. Well, unfortunately, New Jersey has a reputation where they do ask people. So I didn't know what they really meant. But what they were saying is, why don't we ask people what they would like to contribute, what their vision is, and see whether or not their vision can marry with the organization's vision, and how can they both utilize and maximize what they both can bring to the table. I'll give you a quick example. I have a situation where this is particularly true of some of my small employers, where when a new employee is hired, we pair that new employee with a veteran employee who operates as a mentor, who basically says to that new employee, here's how we do it here at Community CPA, okay? Because what we found is oftentimes the first person the new employee met was the employee we were trying to fire. So, the troublemaker. And what we did is when we start pairing that new employee with the veteran employee, guess what we did? We increased that veteran employee's pay during that 90 to 120 day introduction period for the new employee, a 2.5% increase to their base pay. We also, have you seen these little stickers the football players have on their helmets? We also gave that mentee, that mentor, those stickers. So if you went to that organization, you would see stickers on briefcases, on computers, on laptops, because it was a sign of recognition that this had been a successful mentor to the new employee, and people fought for that mentorship.
Yeah.
That's an example of how you take something and you take it from a transactional to a transformational posture, and people love it.
Yeah, I really did appreciate your comment about the importance of both transactional and transformational people.
Yes.
I think the important question is, do they value whatever they do in whichever area they are performing, where they feel that they're appreciated, is the biggest question.
To answer that question, does the organization value that, and is it transmitted throughout the workforce? If it is valued in that culture, it is valued. The recognition. I have clients who pay 15% below market and they have less than 2% turnover. How is it you could pay 15% below market and have less than 2% turnover? Because it's a good place to work. And people will trade, you may not believe it, people will trade, and let's be clear, money is very important, but people will trade compensation for enjoyment of working at a place where it's a good environment, good management, good co-workers, good customers. They would rather have that over money. And I've been at it a long time, and that has been a constant, Dan.
I see. Well, let's go back to these questions. Question number 6, Ted. When things return to normal, there may be opportunities for some and to continue working from home, while it may be determined that others must return to on-site work. So how do I explain this to our employees?
Next slide, please. Be truthful, be transparent. Share with them your rationale for the decisions made. Don't get cute with your reasons because they will see right through it, and it will impact credibility and employee morale. As I said, we have new challenges and new opportunities to address those challenges. It may make perfect sense that some staff, it's a good business for them to remain at home. And for other staff, it's good business for them to come back on site. I would not use the term essential. I understand why it's used, but I find it to be offensive. What do you mean I'm essential and I'm non-essential?
Yeah.
To me, what makes good business sense? That would be the criteria I would use. And I would walk that through the employees. I'm not necessarily, I really wouldn't mind if they disagreed with me. Because ultimately, as an employer, I have to make a decision that I think is best for the organization. I wouldn't mind sharing with the employees my rationale, but I'm not negotiating it. And my point being is I think people appreciate it. But you can't just shoot this off the cuff and just say whatever comes to mind with no thought and preparation. You need some data. You need some facts. You need some good reasonings, even if they disagree with you. Because remember this, whether they work at home or they work on site, they are still part of the organization.
That's right. The last question here we have is, during this work at home period, we have discovered that we actually don't need approximately 20% of our workforce. Good business indicates that staff members should be laid off. How do we address this situation with the staff who will be leaving and the staff who will eventually remain? So
again, be truthful, be transparent. Share with them your rationale for the decisions made. Again, don't get cute with your reasons because they will see through it. Fact of the matter is, we have, and I can tell you this, industry across industry has discovered, because of this pandemic, that many of them, unbeknownst to them, were overstaffed. It would not make sense to bring back folk when you don't have work for them. Now, interesting enough, I have some clients who say, well, I need to bring them back in order to keep that PPP money. And I'm sure you've
been watching those PPP seminars we've been doing. Huh?
And I'm saying, don't do it. Don't jimmy up some excuse that makes no sense. If you need them, it's not a problem. But if you don't need them, don't try that. Please don't. In my opinion, it's unethical, and many will tell you it's illegal. So my point being is, stuff happens. And the way I picked that 20%, that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing from large clients and small clients, that when they look at their workforce, when they bring people back on site, most of them will carve off 20%. Now, I have a few that will be adding. So it's not always it's the same. But my point being is, don't drum up excuses that defy credulity. Don't come up with bogus reasons. Your reasons have to be sound and have a good business platform. And that's what I would recommend. And by the way, I am not suggesting that this is going to be an easy task. These are people you know their families, you work with them. Nobody wants to tell somebody, I'm giving you a pink slip. But you have to look at the whole. And if it's for the greater good, even though it may be painful to dismiss some, you have to look at the whole. So that kind of concludes my first 7. To be honest with you, Dan, we could have this session every week for the next few weeks, and we still wouldn't run out of some of the challenges. But I wanted to address these that I thought were the critical key 7 that needed to be addressed today.